China and Greece, two of the most ancient and influential civilizations in human history, have traditionally maintained strong relations and communication. Underscoring this bond, a high-level delegation of various Greek companies arrived in Shanghai for the first ever China International Import Expo that began on November the 5th. As the trade volume between the two countries keeps growing, how can both sides work together to advance bilateral economic ties to the next level? Why is boosting economic ties such a priority for both China and Greece? Joining me was Grigoris Stergioulis, the chairman and CEO of Enterprise Greece, a government agency to promote Greek businesses worldwide. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for accepting our interview.
The honor is mine.
Thank you. Now, China has become the world's largest market, and there is an increasing middle class who are thirsty for high-quality goods, some of which can be provided by Greek companies. How do you say that the determination of China to import more goods have contributed to the visibility of Greek products here in China?
Well, first of all, we are glad to have China as such a grown-up economy. You know, being in China is like feeling home. And I think there's an answer to this. The answer is that our two nations have been living on this planet for more than 4,000 years, meaning they have grown up together. And you know, it's like couples. When they grow up together, they have the same habits, the same DNA. And I feel that, believe me, we can feel that it's just like being home. And from this point of view, we do follow thoroughly the growing of the Chinese economy, and I think the honor and the happiness is common for both our nations, Greece and China. Now, there are some characteristics regarding the Chinese development, and as in most nations, the characteristics are that the middle class is growing, it's becoming richer, it's changing its habits. And we can see that to a very, very big extent of the tourists coming to Greece from China. These are not the typical tourists who go, you know, sun and beach, that they lay down, they drink, and they spend most of their time trying to suntan and go back to their countries. Chinese tourists, and it is to credit to their culture, they go around, they try to get into the society, to learn their habits, to taste new things, to experience the history, the monuments, the gastronomy, everything. So it's a totally different kind of approach. And believe me, this is the proposal of the Greece has to offer to China. It's not a mass tourism, it's not a mass product, it's not a mass kind of consumption, but a very, very delicate kind of products and services.
Right now, how easy it is for Greek to export its goods or services to the Chinese consumers? What are the obstacles or challenges still ahead?
First of all, it's true that Greek producers has to be gradually transformed into enterprises, into managers, into, how can I say, exporters. This is the biggest difficulty. Now, when you enter a country, when you enter a market, you have to respect the market itself, its rules, its habits, its differences, all these characteristics they have. And from this point of view, believe it or not, we feel very confident because we have the same kind of approach on things. You do like quality, you do like good services, you do like to be convinced that we are not going to let you down. You have to be convinced that the quality will be exactly the same as it is. You have to be convinced that what you buy today will be not worse than what you bought yesterday. And from this point of view, we have to try harder, because you know what is best in life than getting into a very hard and difficult market. That's the beauty of life.
What kind of assistance, however, is being provided for the Greek enterprises who want to get into the Chinese market on your side, for instance?
Our participation to this effort is multitasking. First of all, we have to get to know what is happening in China. Second, we have to get to know what is happening in the Greek, what the dynamics of the Greek companies. Acting as an interface. Interface means trying to understand what are the needs of the Chinese people and what we can offer to them. Then we can go to the legal issues, what kind of certification you may need, what kind of imports you may need, what kind of procedures you may need, which is the second part, the difficult part. But I think after all these meetings we had in China, I have a very strong statement to make. If you get into China and convince the Chinese people that you can offer a different proposal, you will never get out.
What is the Greek presence here during the China First International Import Expo in terms of tourism, for instance? What kind of profile are you exhibiting to the Chinese customers?
To be honest, the reason we came here on a very, to my opinion, very high hierarchy of people is most to learn, not only to propose. So we had to witness what kind of market it is there, what kind of people we had to look into, what kind of attitude they have against.
What have you learned?
I have learned that things are far more serious. China is growing so quickly. I had the chance to meet many officials, and I think they are very full-thinking people, very serious people, and we have to treat them exactly the same way. We don't want to come to a country and get out after a couple of years.
In terms of bilateral trade in goods, let's look at the trend here. For instance, in 2017, according to statistics, the trade between China and Greece was $5.1 billion. Of that trade, 15% increase was contributed to China's exports to Greece, but 50% increase was Greek export to China, so a very fast increase of Greek exports to China. Given such momentum, how do you foresee the potential of bilateral trade, say, for the next 5 to 10 years?
Allow me, for the first time of this interview, to disagree with you. We are not happy with the figures. The figures are really, you know, the heritage we have out of this 4,000 years of cooperation now, you know, between the two nations. These figures are really disappointing. The growth we have, about 50%, is very small as compared to the dynamics of the cooperation between the two countries. I would say, and allow me to say, that if we don't have anything like triple this number, very soon it will be a big failure for both of us.
Okay. Well, in terms of tourism, for instance, there is great potential in there, although it's not counted in the trading goods statistics. However, for instance, in 2017, we had 120,000 Chinese visitors to Greece. That's already an increase of 35% compared to a year earlier, and it is estimated that this number will rise to 180 this year, and by 2020 it will go up to 400,000 to 500,000. So given the large volume and huge interest Chinese tourists have in your country, what kind of measures are being taken to facilitate their arrival? For instance, in terms of visa facilitation, is it going to be made easier for the Chinese visitors?
Very good point. First of all, visas will be facilitated. That's a decision made by the central government that we're going to do it. The second important thing is the direct flights to Greece. We pass this information to the Greek authorities, to the Chinese authorities. We are trying to fully support this issue because we only have a direct flight from Peking to Athens. We have to get one from Shanghai also, which is the most developed, to my opinion, touristic market of China. The second thing is that it is in our hands is to describe the touristic product of Greece. I don't think that many people know that we're not going to sell you something like, as I said, sea and sun. We have to sell gastronomy, we have to sell history, we have to sell culture, we have to sell winter tourism, and all these things that not many people know. And you know what? The Chinese market, as I explained, is totally different to the market of the Northern European or the Americans. It's much more demanding, it's much more qualitative, and we have to fulfill the needs and the perspectives of the Chinese touristic market.
Well, at the same time, there is actually a very deep, profound link between the Greek culture and the Chinese culture, and unfortunately not to the knowledge of many people. For instance, in the grottos in Dunhuang from the Sui and Tang dynasty area, we actually see a lot of Greek influence. The statues, for instance, some of the statues that we see in those grottos actually resemble the forms of Greek statues, right? So how are you going to tap into that historical link between the two civilizations and make more concrete enrichment to the Chinese people and to the Greek people as well?
Yes, this is true. This is exactly what we have to do. And you know, I will try to make, how can I say, a statement that I dare to do. It's a common problem. It's something we have to do together. It's something we have to sit down, design it, with respect to both nations, respect to both civilization, and pull it out. You know, it works vice versa. I would very much appreciate Greeks traveling to China and understand their origins, their roots. And Chinese people to understand when they come to Greece, it's like feeling home, because part of their DNA comes from our history, our common history. That's very, very important. Can you tell me many nations that have this opportunity?
Not for the moment, not many. Okay, so apart from the historical civilizational links between the two sides, I want to ask you about the future trade and investment prospects still about the two countries. Greece officially came out of the austerity program in this June. So now that you have finally that period behind you, what kind of new path in terms of trade and investment, external trade and investment, is Greece looking at?
That's a very good point. First, let me answer about the Chinese investment in Greece. There are a lot. I can only mention a couple for the benefit of our discussion. First of all, COSCO. A few years ago, when COSCO tried to get the management of the port of Piraeus, was a big negative discussion within the Greek society. Nowadays, we're not only happy, we're not only successful, we're not only respect the way the Chinese are working with us, that we're planning to expand the cooperation, we're trying to expand the logistics, we're trying to help the Chinese reaching Central and Eastern European products within a few hours from the port of Piraeus. And you know, trading is, according to our philosophy, leading to big enterprises. So now we're talking about big projects, now we're talking about creating infrastructure together, we're talking about creating JVs together, we're talking about making common business. And I think this is exactly what your president mentioned about globalization. Globalization, to my opinion, means doing things together.
Very interesting. Finally, one of the things that China wants to do together with countries in the world is this Belt and Road Initiative. What more opportunities are you seeing there for Greek enterprises?
It's a vice versa, again, issue. You know, Greece these days has its highest educated generation in its history. China, I'm really glad to say that, is stronger than ever in its history. China nowadays is stronger than its history, actually. So we have to work things together. We can give you ideas. You have to get to know the habits of the European people. Greece is a part of the European Union. We have to get you how to get used and close to the European attitude, because you know, all big countries have failed when they did not respect the markets they are getting to. And as I want to say something also very important. It is the first time in history that a country is expanding all over the world without a war. And to the benefit of China, that is the first ever country in human history that is doing that. And we have to congratulate you for this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grigoris Sturgiolis, the Chairman and CEO of Enterprise Greece.
It was an honor to discuss with you.
The Hongqiao International Business, Media and Think Tank Forum was held on November the 5th on the sidelines of the first ever China International Import Expo. While the world is facing challenges of increasing protectionism and unilateralism, what is the media's role in building and communicating an open world economy? In his keynote speech, Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized China's commitment to opening up, saying that China's door will never be closed, it will only open still wider. How do foreign media respond to this? What kind of Chinese business opportunities will they present to local audiences or users? In the second part of the show, I was pleased to be joined by Cliff Marshall, CEO of PA Group, an independent British news agency. So, Mr. Marshall, thank you very much for accepting this interview. What have you found here? What impresses you this time about this expo, about this forum, the level of the ranking of the officials present, for instance?
I think what impresses me is the scale of the change. So I was last year in Shanghai maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and the city seems to be even bigger. It seems to be setting itself even greater goals. And it's the scale of the exhibition and conference centre that we're in today, the scale of the commitment from government officials, from the president downwards, to this event, this first expo event. I mean, that is what's really impressed me.
Do you get the message that China wants to send by hosting such a large-scale import expo? And how do you think that is? Do you think that is relevant to the development stage of China and to the needs of the rest of the world at this moment?
I think it's very relevant, and I think it's relevant in many ways. It's relevant because it's continuing this development and openness of the Chinese economy, which started, I think, 20 years ago. I think it's relevant to the countries that China is trading with, not just the very big trading nations, but we heard today from President Kenyatta from Kenya about the impact that China trade was having on his country, and his desire for Chinese businesses to invest more in his country and manufacture in his country and create products in his country so that they can create more jobs and more value. So I think there's a huge amount, and it can affect different countries in different ways.
What is the perception of the British ordinary people, the British media circle, towards this import expo? Is there a lot of interest? I know everybody is being, you know, how should I say, engulfed in this discussion about Brexit.
But in many ways, and we don't know how Brexit will complete the negotiations, but the sense is that whatever the agreement that the United Kingdom has with the European Union, then our business relationships, our trading relationships with the rest of the world are going to become even more important. So I think there's a great deal of UK media interest in what's happening here in Shanghai, and you can see that by the representatives that are here from media like Bloomberg and CNBC and Forbes and the other media, not just the UK but international media.
Mm-hmm. How do you look at the role of the media when it comes to reporting on China, helping the British public understanding China, from what you see here over the years and from what you read about in the UK? Do you think there is a gap?
Well, I think working for a news agency where our job is to provide news and information to all of the news media in the UK, then we look at our role as being about independence, impartiality, about accuracy, around balance. So that's the way that my company, the PA, would look at China, so that we're providing information. If we're getting information from think tanks, then we need to ask ourselves, who is funding the think tanks? Do they have a particular angle that they're trying to promote? Do we understand the accuracy? Have we checked the accuracy of the information they're providing? Because it's not always accurate. Mm-hmm. And is there another side to that story? Do we need to go and get other people's opinions, or provide other people with an opportunity to put their views across, so that when we deliver that information that came from the think tanks to our customers, that they have a complete balance, have all of the building blocks for that story.
Well, before we continue along that line, do you have the capacity to do that? I mean, when it comes to a story about China, for instance, it's so far away and so much information. How can you guarantee to the maximum extent possible?
So I think if it's a story about China that is coming out of China, then we would have a relationship with people like Reuters and AP and Agence France Presse, and they would provide us with that information. If the story is coming from the UK government or UK business from the United Kingdom, then we have the resources to be able to check and validate that type of story.
But at this moment, do you think the perception of China is very much in sync with the reality here in China?
I think so. I think from a business point of view, I think UK business understands that there's enormous opportunity in China. I think within ordinary people in every country, it depends on their perspectives, and it depends on what's important in their lives. But I think for those that have an interest, then I think there is an understanding that China is a fantastic opportunity, not just for business but for tourism. And tourism can be British tourists coming to China, but it is also this huge increase in Chinese tourists coming to the United Kingdom.
We have a perception, however, that we think the Western media are maybe not always, but quite often biased against stories from China, especially stories about politics in China, as we have a very different system, different thinking, different beliefs, different ideology. Do you understand our worry? This is one thing. And do you see it a similar way?
I think it's always difficult to see yourselves through the eyes of other media. For many years I ran the Australian news agency, and the perspective of the United Kingdom through the eyes of Australians and the view of Australia through the eyes of people from the UK may be completely different, and I think that is always an issue.
But I have the impression, or a lot of my colleagues have the impression, that because of our ideological differences, the kind of difference between the image of Australia and what Australia really is in the eyes of a British person is smaller than the gap about China.
About China. That may be, it may be in some elements of the media a philosophical issue about the systems in China, about the openness, about the way that media is perhaps more controlled in China than it is in the United Kingdom. In my news organisation, the PA, that's not an issue that we would concern ourselves with, because we would be looking for the facts and for giving a balanced story on any issue that we were covering. But clearly, once our customers, the media, take a story, just like in China, then they can choose which stories to cover on their TV channels, in their newspapers, and which angle to take, and that is normal.
What do you think can be done in terms of both sides in making sure that the gap is smaller?
The gap in understanding is smaller? Yeah. I think not just in the media but in life, the more communication that you have, the more understanding you have of each other's positions, then the chances are that the gap will then close.
Do you see more communication at this moment between different cultures, different civilizations? I
think so, probably more than we've ever had in the history. When you think about social media and the ability for people to, and perhaps the problem now is we have too much information. And that information often is quite extreme, that there's no middle ground. People are either 100% against something or 100% for something. Yeah. And so that balance, the position in the middle is not necessarily quite the same as it used to be.
Yeah, what can be done about it? Do you think that's a major issue that needs to be tackled? Or?
Yeah, I think perhaps we have to live with it, because we're in an era of people wanting short sound bites, and I guess for you as a TV channel, it's playing to your strengths, because people now don't want to read long stories. They want to have short video that really gives them the whole story. So things are changing, but things are always changing.
How do you look at the trends, however, that we're seeing in this world? For instance, the rise of populism, the rise of nationalism, of protectionism. Do they worry you? And if so, do you think the way out lies where?
That's a very big question for somebody running a news agency. I think from a personal point of view, I believe in open markets and open communication. So that would always be my preference. But what the solution is, I guess when you're in the middle of these changes, it's very difficult to see where the solution lies. But
some opinions saying globalization is irreversible, but you have to make it more inclusive, and there are other people who are saying it's a bit too early to tell. You need more solid facts to make conclusions.
My personal view would be that globalization is irreversible, and that the point that your president made about the door is open and it's going to get more open, and I think the impact that China will have as your economy gets bigger and bigger, then if you maintain an open approach to the economy, the global economy, then that is going to have an impact on countries all over the world.
Would you be worried about the result of the US midterm election or President Trump's policy further down the road?
Okay, I mean, in my role, we don't have an opinion, we just report the news. So everything changes, and in the end, nothing changes a huge amount, and the world continues, and business continues, and I think everything evolves over time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall of the PA Group.
Thank you.
And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.